Hi, my name is Christopher Hudson. Most people know me as the Forerunner. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Long Island, New York, which happens to be a really nice part of New York. Most people think that I grew up in Harlem or Brooklyn, but I actually grew up in Long Island, New York, and I grew up in a really nice household. I had my father and my mother, my older brother and my older sister. And my father, yes, really did really well in life for himself. He was a hard worker, so he just provided all the good things in life for my family. I always like to say that I grew up in the back of a Cadillac because my father had several Mercedes-Benzes. He owned apartment buildings in Brooklyn, all types of luxury houses in Florida. He was just a real hard-working, stand-up kind of guy, but he looked like a gangster. Everybody thought he was a drug dealer because he had this serious scar on the side of his face, and he would wear all the best suits and wear fur coats. He had the Jerry curl at one point. Just a really serious-looking character. But by the time I got about 12 or 13 years old, I began to come in contact with some of the realities of life that changed my whole perception of life itself. I'll never forget, I was going with my father to his office one day, and he pointed out this car that was parked on the side of the road, and he said, "You see that car, Chris?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's the FBI." And it was from that point I realized that the FBI was watching my father because of some type of business transactions that he was involved in. Although he wasn't necessarily gaining any financial gain as a result of what he was doing, he was helping some people make some money. And as a result of that, he came under serious scrutiny from the FBI. And it got to the point that every day when I would follow him to the office, I could pick out the FBI cars. And so from that point in my life, I kind of became very familiar with the law and kind of having an eye open for the feds, if you could say. And at that point in my life, I began to think, well, there's nothing wrong with being a good guy that kind of, you know, blurs the lines or kind of does some things that people might call gray in this life. And that really had a big impact on my whole perception of reality. And then to make matters worse, by the time I was 13, my mother told my family that she was diagnosed with bone cancer. And so for several years, I watched my mother just go downhill, dying from cancer as it spread all across her body. And at that point in time, my brother and sister went away to college. So I was the only one there that was taking care of her. My father was at work, working hard, and because of the bills that were coming in and because of the legal case that he got hit with the FBI and all of these different things, the money that used to be there wasn't there anymore. But I had become accustomed to a certain type of lifestyle, so I realized by the time I got about 15 years old that if I wanted to continue to dress the way that I used to dress and all those things, that I was going to try to have to go out there and get it myself. And so it was about that time in life that I decided to start getting involved in illegal activities. And I was never the type of individual off the back to like stand on a corner and sell drugs or anything like that. But I definitely wasn't against doing something that was illegal to fill my pockets that might hurt somebody else's pockets. By the time I was 17 years old, I started getting involved in kind of petty credit card fraud cases and did things like that here and there. And then I had a friend that was working for a major bank. I'm not going to name the bank, but one day he told me that he needed to speak with me after he got home from work, and he made mention to me that they were getting ready to set up this new credit system. Matter of fact, it was the introduction of the debit card. And he told me how the debit card worked, how it'd be an ATM card that worked like a credit card. And we were just 18 years old, but he did work within that banking system in the customer service department. And so at that point, we made a plan how we were going to begin to fleece people's accounts that had $10,000 or more. And it spiraled. It continued to go forward one step after the other until it turned into this big network that pretty much went throughout the state of New York. And you had a bunch of 18-year-old African-American young men walking around like they were in the mafia, and that's what we used to call ourselves, the Mandingo Mafia. And we were just making money, and people driving around in luxury cars, and always eating out at Italian restaurants because, you know, we thought we were mafia, so we always wanted to present ourselves like that to the public. And by the time the whole scheme came to its bitter end, to my knowledge, we netted something over $500,000, half a mil. And you know, there was this one young man that got involved with the scheme, that they were talking about getting involved with the scheme, and I said to them, you know, if this guy gets involved with the scheme, we're all getting ready to go to jail. But against my advising, they got him involved, and sure enough, he was the one that got caught by the feds and started to rat on everybody. At that time, because they didn't want to listen to my advice, they cut me out of the network. But the first person that this guy tried to nab after the FBI nabbed him was me. So he approached my girlfriend at that time with a wire on him, and he tried to get her to confess some things about my involvement in the whole operation. But I thank God the young lady I was with was pretty street smart. So when she heard the type of questions and the pointed nature of the questions that he was asking her, she put her hand on his chest and she actually felt the wire. And so she answered his questions in a way that pretty much diverted the information in a different, you know, diverted the direction of the investigation off of my tail. And that was really just the grace of God. And when it all boiled down, when the financial institution and the FBI all became knowledgeable of the fact that it was a bunch of 18-year-old African and American young men fresh out of high school that were involved in actually fleecing this institution for $500,000, and we completely cracked their new system. No charges were set on anybody because they didn't want the public knowing that their new debit card system was completely fleeced by a bunch of 18-year-old black boys. And once again, that was really just the mercy of God, because if it had ever went down at that time, I'd probably done a lot of time in jail. But God was merciful, and but I didn't accept the fact that God was being merciful. I just thought that we were really smart and we were able to get away. So this really didn't change my mindset about getting involved in illegal activity. And as time went on and I got involved more in the music and the music industry, I got involved in different things that I never thought I would have gotten myself involved in when I was younger. And my father and mother really had that great influence in my life. But with my mother gone, I really had no desire to know anything about God, and I really had no desire to have that type of real moral direction in my life. So I decided to really make some decisions for myself, and pretty much what I idolized was what I saw going on in the movies. The gangsters that were making it out there and seemed like that they were intelligent individuals, yet they were getting over on the system, doing things that were illegal. Those types of things I had a respect for, and I respected my father because he made a lot of money at times past, but he did things that crossed the lines of the law. So I thought that I would, you know, continue in those lines of life, and that would be the way that I would prosper. And I had no desire to live a long life. I always told myself that by the age of 25, I just wanted to make a couple of $1 million and die rich and famous. And so that was really my whole purpose for existing and just trying to obtain that particular goal. So I did go away to college. At the age of 17, I started college. I went to college early because I saw how much fun my brother was having at college partying. I figured I was done with high school, so I doubled up in high school just so I could get to college and start partying. But then, you know, I never really paid attention to the academics. Not that I wasn't able to handle the academics. That wasn't the focus of my life. I was always looking for something that I could apply in real life application. If what the teacher was talking about I couldn't apply immediately in the world, I didn't want to have any time with it. I didn't want to spend any time with it because I had only one purpose for existence, and that was to make it rich by the time I was 25 and then die young. And so I knew one industry that I could get in and do that, and it was the industry that I always desired to get in from the time that I was 12 years old. And my brother introduced me to rap music, and of course that was the entertainment industry. So by the time of 19, I was put out of school on academic probation, which really didn't bother me at all because my whole desire was to be in the entertainment industry anyway. So I headed back to New York And I had this complete focus in my mind that I was going to get into the entertainment industry by the end of that summer. And sure enough, I was so persistent that within 3 months I was able to break into the entertainment industry, and I started out writing what they call treatments for music videos, which is basically the storyline for a music video. And did a couple of projects like that, and just got into the inner circle and got the opportunity to walk around with a lot of the big stars in the industry at that time and begin to see the inner workings of the industry and how I could just make my way through and make as much money as I possibly could in a short period of time. And I'll never forget, one day one of my managers called me into their office and they told me, you know, Chris, you've really been doing good in all these different projects that we've been giving you. How'd you like to try your hand at writing a movie script? And I had never written a movie script before, but I'm 20 years old at this point, and had my opportunity to write a couple of storylines for music videos, treatments, and so forth. So I figured I'd definitely love to try my hand at that, because it would make me a real commodity in the music industry, because my real focus was the hip-hop music. I was a rapper from the time I was 13. My father would go to the parent-teacher meetings at the high school, and the teachers would always tell my father that I was the best rapper in school, so that didn't make him pretty happy, but that was my focus for existing. And so when this proposition was made to me to write this movie script, I said, of course. When do I have to have the script in? And they told me tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. And I thought to myself, tomorrow night at 8 o'clock? And they said, yeah, Chris, we know, but we're producing a project. They don't have a known writer for the project as of yet, so we thought you'd like to try maybe you just go home, try your hand at writing it, just bring what you can ever back to us by 8 o'clock tomorrow. And so I left from their office, and I went to the supermarket, and I bought myself a can of coffee. And went home, sat down at my writer's desk, opened up that can of coffee. As I was writing, and as I started to get tired, I took about 3 or 4 handfuls of that coffee, and I ate the coffee. And continued to write. And by the next day, before 8 o'clock, I went into my manager's office, and I dropped on their desk a 200-plus page script, or one of their desks at least. And then my manager, he looked at my other manager, and he looked back at me and says, what's this? And matter of fact, I said, this is the script you asked me for. He says, is it any good? And I said, I have no idea. And so I left from the office, and a couple of days passed. And they gave me a call, and they said that they really enjoyed the script, and they began passing it around to some different executives, and they ended up taking the story on. And it turned out to be Madonna's first film project for her Mad Guys film production company. And then I got different offers to write various other scripts and pilots for TV programs, etc. And I was doing these projects that I was getting in very short periods of time, like 1 week I'd write the movie pilot, or in 1 month I would write a movie script, or in a couple of days I'd write a script. And most all of these scripts I would write over at my girlfriend's house at that time, which was a Haitian young lady, and her father practiced voodoo over there. And so I'd be there smoking marijuana. Her father had all these different, voodoo implements in the house, like cut up $100 bills and stuff like that. And I'd be there writing this music under the influence of marijuana, and the music would come to me, the scripts would just come to me. My girlfriend could look at me at that time, and she would say, you got a song coming to you, don't you? And I'd say, yeah. And shortly thereafter, I'd be able to put out a hook and put out some verses. It was just like that at that time. I would never write the songs. They would just come to me. And, later on in life, I knew what was really behind that, but at that time, I just thought I was good like that. But one day, as I was at home, looking in the mirror in the bathroom, I looked myself in my eyes, and I could clearly see that there was a presence that was present with me that wasn't me. And most people, of course, would say they might have been fearful of that, but I actually smiled. And I smiled because I realized that whatever was present with me was giving me the ability to be successful with my music, be successful with my writing, be successful on the streets, because I was selling drugs at that time. And you have to have a rep out there on the streets, and people have to know that you're a serious individual. And the type of circles I was moving around, the type of individuals I was moving around, and the spirit that was in me, the demon that was in me, was giving me the abilities that I desired, so that I could be successful on all of these different fronts that I had engulfed myself in. in the world. And I enjoyed it. I had no desire to be free from it. I wasn't foaming at the mouth. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't being thrown into convulsions. I was a guy that was walking around on a daily basis, possessed by a demonic spirit that was assisting me to make rap music, to write movie scripts, and to just be successful all out, period. But I realized that at one point in my life that I started acting in ways that were not, normal for my upbringing. I was definitely the type of individual that was willing to do pretty much about anything at that point in time in my life. I didn't have respect for another man's life or anything of that nature, but there were certain things that, in my mind, you didn't cross those lines. And I still had a respect for some people's lives. If you crossed me, then I was willing to cross you, but I wasn't the type of individual just to pull people into positions of violence or danger if they pose no threat to me, because my whole existence was about making money, and that was the end of the story. And I'll never forget the thing that really began to spark me, that I was beginning to get out of control, was I went to this party in Queens at one of my friends' house. And they asked me to watch the gate for a minute, and so I was there watching the gate, talking to my friends. Everybody was having a good time. And then I saw that there was a bit of a argument that broke out between some of my boys and some other guys from the neighborhood that the party was being held in. And all of a sudden, within seconds, just a huge shootout broke out. Automatic weapons everywhere. Brothers were running on top of cars shooting guns. It was just crazy. And there I found myself running, trying to dodge bullets. And I never forget, I just grabbed this young lady that was running for her life, and I used her as a human shield to protect me from the bullets that were flying. And she was screaming for her life, and I said a few choice words to her that I certainly couldn't say now because I'm walking in Jesus Christ. But in no uncertain terms, I let her know that she just needed to be quiet. But shortly after that scenario, I realized that I was really pushing the edge a little bit too far, and maybe I needed to try to change the way that I was thinking, and I wanted to try to have control over this spirit that was in me. But I realized that what I thought I had control of, it really had control of me. And so there I was, living my life in this possessed state, knowing that I'm in a possessed state, but really not knowing how to change the direction of my life. And to fast forward, because I don't have all the time in the world to share every intricate aspect of the things that took place in my life, but there was one day that I picked up some money from a young man that was selling some drugs for me. And I went uptown Manhattan to go pick up some weight from my supplier. And after I picked up that weight, I just had this burden that was on my heart that I didn't know where it came from, but I decided that I was going to go into a nearby park in a very, known area. And I sat down in that park and I rolled up a blunt of marijuana and I began to smoke with all these drugs on me. And all of a sudden, this voice just started speaking to me in my head saying, Chris, you need to stop selling these drugs. And then I responded, I need to stop selling these drugs. I said, Chris, you need to stop smoking marijuana. And I responded, I need to stop smoking weed. And he said, Chris, you need to stop writing these movies. And I responded, I'm going to stop writing movies. And then it said to me, you need to stop doing this rap music. And then I responded, I need to stop doing the rap music. It said, Chris, you need to go to school and become a preacher. And I said, you know what, I'm getting ready to go to school and become a preacher. It was out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere, that this voice just spoke to me, and here I was responding yes to all of these things that were so important to me in my life. I said, I'm going to stop doing them. But I realized at that time that whatever the voice was telling me that I needed to do, something inside of me was just urging me on, saying, if you do what this voice is telling you to do, you're going to experience the freedom that you're actually looking for, that you're not telling anybody that you're looking for. So I knew in the depth of my heart that this was what I was looking for, even though I didn't know this was what I was looking for. And it was my Damascus Road experience. I went home that day. I told my family that, you know, I was getting ready to go to school and become a preacher. My father was floored. Went into my room, picked up my TV, walked down the stairs, threw the TV out into the street. People thought I was crazy, but even when I was in the world, even under the influence of marijuana, I knew that TV was garbage. But I was willing to use that medium to carry out my agenda in the world. It was clear to me that the TV was filth. Even when I was under the influence of marijuana, I could clearly see that it was being used to push an agenda and to just completely place in society morals that were no morals, but it was just absolute immorality. So I knew that if I wanted to progress in this new decision, this new walk that I had made a choice to enter into just hours before that time that I threw the television out, I knew that the television had to go. And then shortly thereafter, I got a phone call from one of my close friends, and he was asking me what was I going to do later on that day. And I told him, man, listen, I'm not going to the studio. I'm not smoking weed anymore. I'm getting ready to go to school and become a preacher. And he said, what? Man, I was in the studio with you last night. We were smoking weed together last night. And he said, man, I'm not going to work. I'm coming over. You're going to tell me what happened. And he did that. He turned his car around and he came over, and I told him exactly all the things that took place that day. And as a result of me giving my life to the Lord, every last one of my friends that were in my inner circle, they all gave their life to Jesus Christ. And then that's when it really got supernatural. Because everything crazy that could have happened after that, it just happened. You know, I'd be in the house, lights were turning on and off. I remember I was laying in my bed a night after, telling my sister how my life was so different. All of a sudden, I could just tell the change. And there I was laying in my bed, eyes open, looking at the ceiling, thinking about the change that took place in my life. And all of a sudden, I knew I couldn't move in the bed. And at that time, I lifted a lot of weights, you know, talking about every day I'd wake up and do 200 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 200 dips. And that was my warm-up before I hit the weights. So, you know, I was stronger then. And I remember that there I was laying in the bed. I couldn't even move my arm. I couldn't move my head, couldn't move my legs. And then I heard the sound of wind rustling against itself. And I looked at the window and I saw that the window was closed. And I realized something was going on in that room that I had no power over. So I closed my eyes so tight, blood could have came from my eyelids, because I was so terrified. I had bullets fly over my head before, and I was never that terrified. And there I was, and I remembered something about at the name of Jesus, you know, how that could break the power of the devil. So I said, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I remember after calling on Jesus a couple of times, how everything just stopped, and whatever was holding me had let loose of me. And I was pushing so hard on the bed, it was like I immediately flew up out of the bed and I was right on my feet. And I just started shouting in the house, this is real, Jesus is real, this is a spiritual warfare. And from that point, I could not stop preaching. Everywhere I went, I was preaching the gospel. What little bit of the gospel I knew, that was what I was preaching. I didn't care if somebody had guns on them. If they were ready to shoot me, they were going no place until they professed that Jesus Christ was Lord. That was the way that I was so militant about preaching the gospel everywhere I went at that time. If I went in McDonald's to go get some fries, before I left McDonald's, everybody in that McDonald's was holding hands and praying. That was just the type of relationship that I had with God at that time, and the type of militant nature. And that's just the type of militant mindset that I had after I really came to realize that Ephesians 6 and verse 12 was true, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I just felt at that point nothing could stop me from preaching the truth. Anything I prayed for, it was almost like it would happen instantaneously. I'd be going to somebody's house because they called me and said they wanted to hear me tell them about what I was learning in the Bible. And I would be driving over there with my friends, and I say, Lord, we need to get over there quickly. We need all green lights. We can't have any red lights. Amen. They could be red lights, all of a sudden you just see every red light go bing, bing, green, 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 green. I mean, that was the type of thing we saw happen on a daily basis. It was just happening like that. And I was fully convinced that the God of heaven was in existence, and that if we prayed, he heard and he answered us. And you know, that was the way that a whole summer just went, just supernatural experience after supernatural experience. And then I invited over to my house the young lady that I was dating prior to all of these things taking place in my life, and I began to tell her what the Lord was doing in my life, how he was real, how he was powerful, how he had the ability to change us, and he wanted to use us. And then in the midst of me talking to her, I heard the piano playing in my father's house. And I had some friends over at that time, but when I looked over in the room where I knew they were located at, each one of them were there and they were all sleeping. And the reason that they were sleeping was because we were out all night and all morning praying, so they just fell out tired. And I still heard this piano playing in my father's house, so I took her by the hand and we walked to the room where my father's piano was located, and it was in a room where you had to walk up maybe about 3 or 5 steps. And as we were walking up the steps, we saw the keys on the piano randomly going down one by one, ding, 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 ding. And I looked over at her, and she just had tears rolling down her face. She was paralyzed, and I was getting ready to run and leave her, because it was crazy. I never saw anything like that before, but I still, once again, remembered at the name of Jesus. So I said to her, you know what, let's pray. And then we went into the room right by the piano, and we knelt down and we prayed. And as we prayed, the piano stopped playing. And then I looked at her in the eyes and I said, I told you, this is real. And I thank God she gave her life to Jesus Christ as well, as a result of seeing these things and the activities that were taking place in my life at that time. And so after the summer, I went off to college to go become a preacher. And I'll never forget, after my first class and the theology complex, I came out and I looked around and I saw all of these different college students with their book bags and pencils and books and all of these things, and I thought to myself, what in the world am I doing here? It was as if this reality check came, but it wasn't a reality check. It was the devil that was trying to check me from moving forward in Jesus Christ. And I thought to myself, I must be crazy, because all these people are here trying to study and learn how they can make money, and I just left money. And then to make matters worse, when I went into my dorm, one of my suite mates had the latest Source magazine, which at that point was the most popular hip-hop magazine, and inside of it there was an advertisement for the movie that I wrote the story to. And I thought to myself, I got to be crazy. I should be in New York, I should be at the premiere of my movie, and I'm out here talking about I'm going to become a preacher. And at that time, I just completely gave up on God, absolutely 100%. I went 100% back into the world. Matter of fact, I went so hard 100% back into the world that I started a drug operation between New York and down south, that I was making triple the money that I would make on the drugs in New York in the south, and just moving these drugs back and forth trying to make money. And then my focus went back on the entertainment business, that I was going to jump back into entertainment business, and I was going to make this album that the Lord stopped me in my tracks from making, because I had everything lined up. At that time, DJ Clue's sister was my manager, and if anybody knows, back early 90s, DJ Clue, early 2000, matter of fact, he had signed with Rockefeller Records a little bit after that, but DJ Clue was the man. That was, if you wanted DJ Clue mixtape, you were in the game, end of story, game over. And I knew that we were completely shoed in. Matter of fact, you know, when I went in the studio and I would sit down with these guys, every time we rhymed for them, their eyes would pop out of their heads. Everybody wanted to do something with us. And so here I was, talking about I was going to become a preacher, and the devil just brought upon me this massive deception within a moment's time to make me feel like I was crazy, and all that I was doing in the name of the Lord was a bunch of foolishness, and I lost my mind for 3 months. And now he was bringing me back into the reality of life, and that was to make money in the entertainment business, make money on the streets selling drugs, make money writing these movies. But that wasn't reality, that was actually deception. But I fell for the deception, and I can't even lie about it, because that's the reality of what happened. And so here I was selling drugs again. And I went to start to write the music again, went to start to try to do the scripts again, but I could not even get one word out. I tried my best to try to get one line down for a verse. Couldn't even do it. And it was the most frustrating thing in my life because I had never experienced quote-unquote writer's block. But that wasn't writer's block. See, because the ability to write the way that I was writing and to produce the type of content, the caliber of content that I was producing, it wasn't just coming from within me. It was coming from that spirit that was dwelling in me. And so in the midst of trying to produce some content that I thought would be worthy for putting on the radio, I got frustrated because I realized I wasn't able to do it. And I said, man, I know what I got to do. All I got to do is denounce Jesus Christ and it'll all come back to me. And so I had fully set in my mind that I was going to turn my back on Jesus Christ. So I had a couple of $1,000s in my pocket at that time. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the jewelry store. I'm going to get some new jewelry because, you know, this is the entertainment industry. You have to have your whole image correct. So I said I was going to go get myself some new jewelry, get myself some new tattoos. Going to go get some new beats from my producer, go buy some weed, and it was all going to come back to me. That's what I set in my heart to do. So my first stop was the jewelry store, and I went into the jewelry store and I looked around. And then I saw some rosary beads, and I knew that rosary beads were connected with the Roman Catholic Church, and I came to understand, according to Bible prophecy, that the Roman Catholic Church was the Antichrist power, according to Daniel chapter 7, speaking of it as the little horn, and the power that would think to change times and laws, and that would blaspheme the name of God, that it would speak stout words against the Most High. And Revelations chapter 12 and Revelations chapter 13, which clearly pointed this power out as a blasphemous power that spoke against the Most High. So I thought to myself, I wanted to associate myself with anything that was blaspheming God and setting itself up in opposition to God. So I told the jeweler, give me those rosary beads. And he gave me those rosary beads. Then I told him, okay, now I want you to turn the cross upside down. And he said to me, why would you want to turn the cross upside down? And I said, well, because I'm paying for it. That's why I want you to turn the cross upside down. And so I left from the jewelry store and did all the things that I said I was going to do, got myself some marijuana, some beats from my producer, and I went back to my apartment that I had at that time, and I sat down in that apartment. I put that CD into the CD player, turned the lights off in the room. And the only light that was shining in the room was a red light coming from that CD player. And I rolled up some weed, sat down in front of the mirror, and I just began to smoke. As the beats were playing, I just began to smoke as the smoke was going up in the air. I was just looking myself directly in the eyes, watching the smoke go up in the air. And shortly thereafter, you know what happened? It all came back to me. I was making songs as fast as my producer could record them. And I was trying to make the songs as fast as my producer could record them because I didn't want Jesus Christ to stop me in my tracks again like I saw him do earlier that year in the park, and keep me from advancing and being successful in the entertainment industry. But after, it's such a sordid ordeal, it's almost hard for me to try to encapsulate it all into a short time frame to tell you all of how God led me back from that situation into the truth. But I'll fast forward as much as I can. An event took place that I landed up in jail. And there I was in jail, in this holding pen. I was in this holding pen. Matter of fact, the reason I was in the holding pen was because I decided that I was going to go away to the islands, spend some time partying on the beach, smoking weed, just having a good time. And when I got back from the islands, I was going to come back and finish off my album. And the Lord saw it fit to stop me in my tracks, to give me a moment to think about my actions and what was going to be the repercussion of my choices. And so there I was in this holding pen, waiting for night court, hoping that I'd make night court so that I could jump on my flight still to go forward, because in my heart I did not want to listen to what God was trying to tell me. And God didn't allow me to make night court, so I had to stay there in the holding pen with all of these other characters until the morning, until I made morning court, went before the judge, and I was able to get off on the charge that they had put on me. And as I came out, my family met me, and I was completely irate at the fact that I missed my flight. My family is here. God's trying to embarrass me, and he's trying to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. I was completely mad with God and everybody else that was trying to lead me in a different direction in my life at that time. And just minutes after I got out of jail, the next thing I knew, I found myself lying in the back of an ambulance because I got a death-threatening wound here to my right arm, which required maybe about 80, 90 stitches. And there I remember laying on the ground, bleeding, dying to death. And then that's when reality checked in on me and said, you know what, you're going to die in your sins. That's what the Lord told me. He let me know that I was going to die in my sins. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what, I don't want to die in my sins. And so there I was in the back of this ambulance, now really considering the direction of my life. And after I get stitched up and after I get out of the hospital, of course, like any person that's had a life-threatening situation, I decide, you know what, I'm going to serve God. But in the midst of me saying I'm going to serve God, the devil still had his plan for me to serve him. Because the pain that I experienced as a result of this wound was just excruciating. I remember as soon as the sedative wore off that I received for the surgery, I just started experiencing pain like I never felt before. And so the doctors put me on a very powerful painkiller, and a very powerful painkiller that I ended up getting addicted to. And then to make matters worse, the doctor at the clinic that I would go to get my checkups, he knew I was addicted to the painkiller. But he told me straight up one day, he said, hey, listen, don't worry about it. Just ask me for the meds. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Because if you feel better and you get better, makes me look good. So he increased the dosage on the pain medication, making everything worse for me. And once again, there I found myself fleeing back to the world, working back on the album. But once again, the Lord was going to let me know that if I didn't turn my life around, I was headed down a path that there was no return from. And I'll never forget, I went to the clinic one day and there was a doctor that actually cared that met up with me, and the doctor asked me how long I had this cast on my arm, and I told the doctor how long I had the cast on my arm for. And the doctor said, what? Immediately they took out some knives and they began to work on my cast, and they took it off, and they looked me in the eyes and they said, young man, I'm going to set you up for physical therapy right now. But when you leave this hospital, you need to go home and start working on your hand by yourself. Because if you don't start working on this hand right now, you're not going to have any use of your hand for the rest of your life. And when I heard that, that was completely, I don't even know what to say. That was an extremely depressing moment for me. And I went home and I began to try to pull my fingers out that were just completely crunched together. I could hear all of this dead tissue popping. And I'll never forget, in that moment, in despair, I cried out to God. And I said, God, what am I supposed to do? This is my right hand. This is the hand that I use. And if you don't want me rapping and doing all these things in the entertainment industry, well, I'm going to need my right hand. This is the hand that I have to use. What do you want me to do with my life? And I said, Lord, I don't ask for dreams. I don't ask for visions. Quite frankly, I don't even really believe in dreams and visions that much. But Lord, give me a dream. Give me a vision. Tell me something. Let me know what you want me to do with my life. And that was my prayer. That night, I had this dream. And the dream was so real that I ended up slamming my bad hand in the wall next to my bed. And I woke up in excruciating pain, but after the pain subsided, I began to laugh because I thought to myself, man, that dream was so real. I'm punching walls up in there. And every time the dream came to my mind, I would laugh because I thought about how it was so real that I ended up punching the wall. And of course, because I had this religious experience with God as a result of coming face to face with the fact that some serious changes were going to take place in my life if I didn't decide to make some serious changes. I began to have morning worship and pray and study my Bible and just seek what God's direction was for my life. And one morning after I had morning devotions, that dream came back to me once again. And I was getting ready to laugh, but as soon as I was getting ready to laugh, the Spirit of God clearly spoke to me and said, don't laugh, because that's the dream that you asked for. And then the Spirit of God began to explain the meaning of the dream to me. And the dream went like this. In the dream, I saw a huge city street. It was like a street in the city of Manhattan, but it was extra big. You know, God always speaks to us in terms that we can identify with. Like Nebuchadnezzar, he was an idolater. So God got Nebuchadnezzar's attention by sending him a dream. And in the dream, he used an image to convey a message dealing with the worldwide empires and the setting up of his eternal kingdom, because Nebuchadnezzar was an idolater. Well, at that point in time of my life, I was a person that loved the street life. I loved the fast life. And so the Lord used a street to convey this message to me. And so this large city street, it was extremely busy. There were all these cars flying back and forth on it. You can see it was just a really busy street. And then there was a crosswalk that, of course, went across that street, but it was extremely dirty. I mean, completely filthy. You could hardly even see it. But I noticed at the further end of the crosswalk, there was a bucket with soap in it and a scrub brush inside of the bucket. And I went across this crosswalk, across this busy street, and I got down on my knees and I took this scrub brush out of this soapy water and I began to scrub the crosswalk. And I would stay I would just stay on one place until it got completely white. And then I would just progressively move back, 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 back until I completely cleaned the whole crosswalk. And then as I got to the end of cleaning the crosswalk, there were two men standing up over me, and they looked down at me and they said, man, clean a crosswalk? And I looked up and I said, well, somebody's got to do it. And that was the end of the dream. And it's because of the scrubbing hand motion that I was making that I actually punched the wall the night previous. And the Spirit of God explained to me that that street, that busy street, was a symbol of this world, this life. How this is a dangerous world. There's so many things going on, and the life is moving at an extremely rapid pace. But even though this world is an extremely dangerous world and how everything is moving at a rapid pace, there are people in this world that would like to make it through this life safely. But how could they get through this life safely if they couldn't see the way? The way was the crosswalk. And God told me that He wanted to make the way clear. He wanted me to make the path straight. And then I said to myself, that's the message of the Forerunner. And that's how I got the name the Forerunner. And that's how I started doing the ministry of the Forerunner. And as I've taken up this work, God has truly been good, and He's blessed, and He's allowed me to see millions of people come into the truth as a result of just saying, Lord, I'll be obedient. Teach me what to do, and I'll do it. And what God has done for me, He'll do for anybody else. And so my prayer is that as you listen to this testimony, if you don't learn anything, learn this. No matter where you are in life or what you may be engaged in at this time, God has a higher design for your existence. And if you willfully surrender your heart to Jesus Christ, the Lord will do exceeding abundantly with your life above that which you could ask or think. All you have to do is surrender your life to Jesus Christ. All your mind, your heart, your soul, your strength. And the Lord will use you not only to glorify his name in this life, but he has a special work for you to do in the life to come. May God bless you. And as always, whether you like it or not, the truth is the truth.